Support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
We continue to measure and watch this new era in political leadership against the backdrop of one of the longest economic expansions within the last 140 years. Hello, I am Chris William, and welcome again to the most widely watched source and dialogue of Carolina business and public policy. In just a moment, we join our panel of experts. And later on, the Tar Heel State's first Republican elected treasurer since 1876. Please stay with us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Jerry Dwyer from Clemson University, Peter Gwaltney of the North Carolina Bankers Association, and special guest, Dale R. Folwell, North Carolina State Treasurer.
Hello, welcome to our program. You know, always the best dialogues happen right before the cameras and the lights come on. So, gentlemen, thank you for being on the program. Happy New Year. I think we can still say that. So, Peter, let's start with you. There is a new political era, new political leadership in North Carolina, at least, Governor Cooper. What do you think Roy Cooper needs to get right? What one thing does he need to get right?
Chris, I would focus on bridge building and relationship building first, because he has an ambitious agenda. And at the same time, our General Assembly is controlled with a supermajority in the House and the Senate. So to get his agenda to move forward, he's going to need to build bridges and build relationships and build trust so they can collaborate and get things done. So
that can't be lost on him, that he has that kind of Republican, Republicans as far as the eye can see in North Carolina.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So that can't be lost on him, though, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. He understands that, and he's a long time, he's been involved in politics for a long time, so he knows that. And so we've offered to help in any way that we can, and we're working with the General Assembly as well. So we want to be part of the bridge building process.
Jerry, as Nikki Haley kind of advances, not kind of, but advances in her political career now into a Trump administration, and Henry McMaster takes the mantle of being a governor of South Carolina, what does he need to do right?
Actually, it sounds kind of trivial, but I think probably the biggest thing he needs to do is get a gasoline tax increase and actually get it spent reasonably sensibly. It's been a big administrative hassle because of the way it's organized in South Carolina, that there's a committee that basically allocates it, and the governor has very little role, if any, in all of that. And so the big concern is if they raise the gas tax, it's actually just going to end up getting wasted in places where there aren't that many people, instead of being spent like where I live in Greenville. The roads just corrugated. It's terrible. You'd think you lived in Chicago in the winter it just ended. And the problem is getting the funds spent on those kinds of things and not getting it spent where it's politically feasible. So that was something that Nikki Haley could never manage. If he can do that, that's really quite a lot.
You know, you bring up a good point here. It seems like the State House, and specifically the House in the General Assembly, has come out with a plan to raise the gas tax, as you had referenced, but also it's going to be about $600 million or so, and it looks like what the South Carolina Chamber called a good long-term solution. Are you seriously afraid, though, that money's going to find its way into pork pockets, so to speak?
Well, some of it will. I mean, that's inevitable. The question is whether you get enough good stuff out of it to make it worthwhile. And I think it's possible. I mean, the problems become serious enough with the roads. And I don't think, people say, oh, the gasoline tax is lower, isn't that nice? It's like, yeah, and the roads are terrible.
Yeah, I guess that's always the rub. A question for you both on where we are in this economy. Certainly the bankers in the state are a little watching that more than just a little, Peter. Do we have an asset bubble at all now, whether it's commercial or residential real estate, the cheap cost of money? Is there something there that is concerning to you in this late stage of the expansion?
I don't think so. We've had such a slow growth economy for quite a long time, but we're not talking internally within the industry about any bubbles that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Okay.
I think housing prices, the thing is, it's so hard to get a mortgage that it's really not nearly as big an issue as it would have been in 2004. It's just nothing like it. I mean, getting a mortgage is very difficult, both in terms of just getting a mortgage. I mean, I've gotten a couple in the last few years, both in terms of getting a mortgage, the amount of documentation that they require, and you have to do it over and over. And so I don't think it's as big a problem as it would be otherwise.
What about commercial real estate? I mean, you cannot not see any cranes going up in just about any city of any kind of size.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges there, in talking to bankers, both large and small, they're reaching their limits in the amount of commercial real estate that they feel comfortable
holding in a portfolio?
Holding in their portfolios, and that the regulatory agencies allow them to lend as a percentage of their total assets. And so that is, in some sense, controlling a bubble from occurring. The question is, to what extent does that limit growth? Does that limit expansion in our communities? How many more cranes could we have?
Well, and stay with that for just a second. So are the banks running up against a regulatory limit, or is there more of a risk limit that is keeping them from saying, I'm not going to do that project?
Well, that's the question I'm asking them. And in some cases, with some banks, it's the regulatory limit. In some cases, it's their internal risk appetite. They know what they're doing. They've been through the cycles. And so they're applying that wisdom, that experience, to not overlend in a particular area to avoid concentration risk.
Jerry, same question.
I'm not really that familiar with commercial real estate other than just, this is anecdotal, is in Greenville they're building apartments everywhere downtown. Apparently it's going to add something like 50% to the capacity. So there's a big question about whether they're overbuilding in that particular area. But I think if you look, for example, in Charleston, you don't really see evidence of overbuilding, for example. I mean they do have construction going on and everything else, but it's not. It's nothing like the fevered pace of 2007, 2008.
So you don't get any sense of that there's that
not
kind
commercial
of
or residential. Yeah. I mean, the question arises because with interest rates as low as they are, getting a mortgage is really cheap. I mean, somebody says, "Would you like to buy a house? We'll lend you money at 3%." It's like, whoa.
Right. Okay. All right. Hold on to that, guys. We're going to bring our guest on in just a minute. Next week on this program, or coming up very soon, rather, Molly Spearman. She's been here before. She is the superintendent of education in South Carolina. Certainly some battles going on between how are they going to fund education and how are they going to fund infrastructure. How do they do both, and how do they do both appropriately? Molly Spearman will be here, I'm sure, defending education. And then in a few weeks, Gene Woods is the newly minted CEO of one of this nation's largest healthcare systems, Carolina's healthcare system out of Charlotte. Gene Woods will be our guest. Our guest now, though, has been with us before, but this time in a new role, a role he hopes he can leverage to an even stronger position for North Carolina's balance sheet as well as its residents. It seems it's more than just talk. Almost 4 years ago now, he was instrumental as chief of North Carolina's Department of Employment Security in reducing a $2.5 billion federal unemployment debt. Joining us now, former North Carolina House Speaker Pro Tem, and now the Treasurer for the state of North Carolina, the Honorable Dale Folwell. Your Honor, welcome back to the program, and congratulations.
Thank you, and thank you for the part that you play to inform the people of North Carolina about these issues. Oftentimes people go to get affirmed about something they already think, but they come to this show to actually get informed about new information.
Thank you, sir. That's very thoughtful, and I know you mean that, sir. first Republican treasurer in the state since 1876. You know, it seems like Republicans, as we were talking about earlier, Republicans as far as the eye can see now in North Carolina. Why has a Republican been excluded from that?
Well, I'm the 28th treasurer of North Carolina. Governor Cooper, I think, is the 75th governor. So the turnover in the treasurer's office has been dramatically less than it has been in the governor's mansion over the history of North Carolina. But Harlan Bowles, who was considered one of the best state treasurers of the 20th century in the whole United States, he wrote a book that you're very familiar with called The Keeper of the Public Purse. And inside that purse is money that belongs to Republicans and Democrats and independents and people from Charlotte and Winston, from rural and urban North Carolina. So the keeper of the public purse has to be completely focused on being loyal to the participants of these health and pension plans and also the taxpayers in North Carolina. I'm honored to be the 28th treasurer of North Carolina with the understanding that I'm the first Republican treasurer in over 140 years.
Your Honor, what's job one? What do you really want to get done? If nothing else, just this one thing.
It's interesting. Somebody asked me the other day, what's it like to apply for a job for an entire year, and then how do you change what you say once you get it? And the fact is, that's what's wrong with our country. People apply for the jobs to be a public servant, saying one thing, and then when they get the job, they do something exactly different. So what you put on your job application should be what you do when you actually have the responsibility of governing. The State Treasurer's Office of North Carolina manages the 25th largest pool of capital, public capital in the world. It's $110 billion, 6 times larger, nearly 6 times larger than the state budget. And the reason that's important to your viewers is that what I've said over the last year are 3 main things. Number one, we want to find out where that $110 billion is, who's managing it, how good they are at managing it, and how much we're paying them to manage it. The investment fees over the last 15 years in the Treasurer's Office have gone up 1,000%, from $50 million of investment fees to over $500 million. So the first job one is to reduce those fees by at least $100 million. Secondly, we have a $32 billion unfunded health care plan. And your viewers may not wake up thinking about these invisible things, unfunded liabilities, but the unfunded health care plan, along with the pension plan, are going to require over $4 billion of the state's budget every year for the next 15 years. 20% of the state budget, not for light bulbs or school buses or roads or community colleges, just for the pension and the health care obligations. And so the second issue is to freeze family premiums so we can get younger, healthier people back on the state health plan. And thirdly is to bring more transparency and sunshine to the office, because as the keeper of the public purse, after all, this is your money.
Peter?
Well, the top 100 public funds in the United States are funded to the extent of about 70% fully funded. How does North Carolina compare to that number and to our peers in surrounding states?
Great question. It's called the funded ratio. This is North Carolina's funded ratio.
By the way, Your Honor, you're the only one in 26 years now that we ever have allowed to bring props. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but thank you for bringing that.
The last time it was teacups.
Yeah.
And you were worried about them falling over. But in answer to your question, when Harlan Bowles left office, the plan was 110% funded, which means it had every dollar it needed plus 10 cents.
Yeah.
Since then, we've obviously had 9/11, we've had the Great Recession of 2008, but we've had something else that people don't think about, a zero interest rate environment. You know, when Harlan Bowles was able to buy Treasury bonds yielding 8%, it was really easy to earn 7.25 and jump over that hurdle. But in a zero interest rate environment, that's very difficult. Our plan, according to this chart, is about 94% funded. But it's 94% funded because we're assuming it's going to grow at 7.25, which it has not done on average this century. And there's only a very small probability it's going to do it over the next 15 years. I think more realistically, our fund's probably 88% funded, still putting us in the top tier, if not the top 1 or 2 best funded pension plans in the United States, even compared to our border states.
Jerry?
This is a different question. In Congress, they're talking about doing away with the Affordable Care Act, and a lot of the effects of that are actually going to hit back at state budgets. I mean, have you thought about What do you think they might actually do, and then how that would affect North Carolina's budget and the citizens?
It's a great question. We actually, under the governor's duties is the Office of State Budget. And the Office of State Budget actually controls the state budget, but the treasurer manages all the pension and health care.
Okay.
So I don't have any direct control over that, except that I'm the largest purchaser of health care in North Carolina, not through Medicare or Medicaid, but simply because of the amount of state employees and retirees that we have on the state health plan. You know, you don't expect this from a motorcycle guy, but the poet T.S. Eliot once said, "Hell is where nothing connects." This is not hell. This is North Carolina or South Carolina. All this stuff connects to something else. So the impact of the repeal, the replacement of the Obamacare is something that someone in my position has to constantly be on top of to figure out how it connects to whatever it is that my roles and responsibilities are.
So does that completely, the idea of any repeal or replacement of health care federally, does that completely reset, put us back to square one on the idea that North Carolina needs to accept these federal dollars from Medicaid?
I don't have an opinion on that. I will tell you what I do know. I do know that we have beginning troopers, beginning teachers, beginning people who are providing the services to the people of this state, some of whom, when they start out working for the state, make $37,000, $38,000 a year. The health care plan that they're in, which I do have responsibility for, based on the family premium this year, they're going to have to work 5 days out of every work month to pay the family premium. So they have a choice between health care and mortgage, health care and energy, health care and food. And so some of our lowest paid state employees are choosing mortgage, food, and energy. And they're not taking advantage, and therefore their families do not have insurance. We can do better. When you have the buying power of 800,000 individuals, you should be able to do it better and more efficiently and more on behalf of the participants than anyone else can. So that's my number one goal, is to figure out how we start solving this $32 billion unfunded liability that the state has inside the state's health plan, unrelated to these other topics. And one way of doing that is by making our health plan younger and healthier, so we can drive down premiums even more.
I'd like to take us back to the state pension plan. One more question on that. You mentioned, we've talked about the governor and the General Assembly, and we've talked about the funding of the plan and some of the things that you want to do in terms of bringing down the cost of the investment advisors and such. The return, the assumed rate of return is 7.25, and we're probably earning less than 1%, I would think, on the portfolio. We're not going to invest our way out of this. What other things can you do or do you need to do to bring the plan to full funding, and will that involve legislative solutions?
Well, I learned this growing up as a blue-collar worker and doing a lot of mechanic work, that what you have to do is you have to listen, act, and fix. That's how you approach any problem. Yeah. There are some big things and some little things. Right now, I've never done speed dating, but I'm doing speed calling to money managers on 18-minute intervals, and we started this last Tuesday. I'm calling every person that manages money for the state. And
personally? You're on the phone with them?
Asking them who you are, where you are, how good you are at what you do, how long have you been in business, how big is our part of your entire organization, and more importantly, how much you get paid. The fact is, you're exactly right. In the last fiscal year, and I saw the look on your face, Jerry, in the last fiscal year, the state pension plan, $100 billion, earned less than 1% for the last fiscal year. For the last calendar year, it did better than that. But the fact is, it has not achieved 7.25%. And these are big issues, because your viewers, some of them are on the pension plan, some of them are on the health plan, but a lot of your viewers are people out there who are just in private business trying to keep North Carolina's economy going.
Why do you think Janet Cowell didn't change that expectation, 7+%?
Because every time that you lower that 0.05 or 5 basis points, it increased the funding cost by tens and tens of millions of dollars, number one. Number two, and we haven't talked about this, which is very important to your viewers as well as the banking community, the ultimate goal of the North Carolina Treasurer is to maintain North Carolina's AAA bond rate. And not a subject that people wake up thinking about in the morning, unless you're Dare County and you just issued a bond so that you could do more dredging, so you could have more economic activity. You know, the AAA bond rating is not just important to the financial center of Charlotte, which is the second largest in the United States. It's important to every municipality and locality and school district and fire department across North Carolina, because us having that AAA bond rating allows them to borrow money more cheaply. And anytime they can do that, that means there's more money for services. As far as the point of me bringing that into your question is very simple. We're not fooling Standard & Poor's or Moody's or Fitch's by assuming a 7.25% rate of return that we have not achieved in 15 years. They understand these issues, and I was not in the military, but I understand the word I, which means I hear you, I understand what you've said, and I'm doing something about it. So the point of me sort of putting a bow on your question is that it's going to be a lot of gradualism. Number one, we need to make sure that everybody who's on the pension plan is supposed to be on the pension plan. We need to make sure every penny, this pension plan paid out $5 billion in benefits to retirees last year. $5 billion. And that's going to $7 billion over the next 9 years, just simply based on increased life expectancy and retirement. It's very, very critical that we make sure that people who are on the plan are supposed to be on the plan, as well as reducing the fees. So if that gradually happens, the General Assembly has fully funded the state pension plan every year for the last 4 years, and then some. We expect that they'll put even more money into it this year. So the gradualness of cutting down on waste and fraud, and everybody uses that term. I'm a person who's actually done it at the Employment Security Commission. Cutting down on waste and fraud, being more realistic about what these returns are, making sure people are getting the money that deserve the money, maybe a gradual increase in interest rates, increased funding, gradualism. We're going to be very aggressive on waste fraud, but all these other issues will be gradual in nature.
Jerry, we've got about 2 minutes.
Speaking as a South Carolinian then, the question is, what is the portfolio invested in? Did you get less than 1%?
We're finding that out when I'm calling these. Well, I called $37 billion worth of money managers in the last 6 days on 18-minute intervals. About 35% of it's in bonds. A huge percentage of it is in what we call alternative investments. About 10% in real estate, and then there's a host of money managers from Edinburgh to Thailand who are managing money for the state. You know, it's important, and that's why every time I've been on this show, I've talked about the invisible, things that people can't see, things that people don't wake up and think about in the morning. But as Bill Gates said nearly 6 years ago, one of the single biggest threats to public education, which I think is very important to your viewers and has always been a topic with you as the moderator, one of the single biggest threats to public education over the next few decades is how we fund and account for our long-term liabilities for pension and health care for public service workers. This is a direct quote from Bill Gates. It's an important issue. I look forward to coming back and informing your viewers about the progress we're making, because when I apply for a job, I hope that 4 years from now that we're going to be talking about results and not just problems.
We've got about a minute left. I'm almost afraid to ask about the bowling pin.
The bowling pin represents that in order to dig yourself out of a $14 billion underfunded pension plan and a $32 billion unfunded health care plan, you've got to focus on the pennies and the paper clips, which means to a bowler, the bowler's not looking at 10 pins. They're looking at one pin. And they have clarity of thought and have things in the right sequence. How to hit that problem, knock that problem down so that when you solve that problem, you solve 9 others at the same time. So the bowling pin is a representation in our culture that we're going to focus on one. If one person is getting pension benefits that are not entitled to them, that's one too many. If one person is on the state health plan that's not entitled to it, that's one too many. If one person calls our call center and they're not getting quality information, that's one too many. If you focus on the one, which in old school terms means the pennies and the paper clips, some of these multi-billion-dollar unfunded liabilities will start taking care of themselves.
Please do come back. We want to ask you how you're going to do those pennies and paper clips to knock off 30+ billion. I mean, that's a big number. But Your Honor, thank you. Glad to have you back on the program.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Jerry, welcome. Good to see
you.
you. Yeah, thank you. Fred, always nice to see. Sorry, your predecessor, Fred Green, was here. You know, I promise I'm not lumping you all bankers in the same thing.
Have us both back sometime.
I will. Thank you. Good point. Until next week. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Please visit us at southcarolinablues.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.